Mount Sinai. There's Maimonides. Why is it that Jews have to have their own hospital? What's wrong with using? We don't have our own police force. Until very recently, we didn't even have our own first responders force. So what's up if we had our own hospitals? So he brings down here that historically Jews were severely limited to their rights to use a hospital. Even in the United States, there was actually a quota of the maximum amount of Jewish patients that were allowed in hospitals. And there was a tragedy because in Berlin in the 1500s, there was a Yid who died because they simply would not let him into the hospital. So it became a zach that Yidden in every city that they are, they built hospitals. I always wondered, why did the Kloisenberg Rebbe feel that he has to build a hospital? It seems like it became a Yiddish zach to build hospitals so that Yidden will have always a place to take care of their health. There's a famous story, I don't know if it's true or not, but a good story doesn't have to be true. Where in Israel, they were opening up a brand new hospital. And they had dignitaries from all over the world, including Arab dignitaries. And as they're walking through the hospital, everybody knows how Israeli hospitals help not only Arab citizens, but they bring in Arabs from their region, from Syria, from Lebanon, when they need medical help, and they actually help them. Even today, the niece of the head of Hamas is in an Israeli hospital today, as we speak, being treated. So an Arab dignitary who was in the tour, there's media there, so he has an opportunity to take a shot at Israel, and he says, look at these hospitals that they built for Israelis. Why aren't they building any hospitals for us Arabs? So a hot-headed Israeli who probably misspoke but couldn't control himself answered, what are you talking about? We hope every bed in this hospital is full of Arabs. It's only the maternity ward that we want. Okay. So Zok the head of the Gemara. We were in the middle of discussing a shaila as to whether or not halacha can be done with the left hand. And the Gemara said that the shaila was asked it was asked from Rav Sheshes. Rav Sheshes was asked the shaila, and at first Rav Sheshes said that it could be done in the left hand, and then the Gemara flogged him up on Mem Testament Aleph from a brisa that says very, very clearly that the avoid of halacha must be done with the right hand, as the brisa quoted, Meisvei Zor v'Oinen Shikar v'Almum the Kabbalah u'Vaylacha v'Zrika Pasuk v'Chein Yosy v'Chein Smor. So the brisa says very clearly, black and white, that Kabbalah halacha, which is what we're talking about, and Zrika, if the left hand is used, it's going to be possible. So Gemara Tiyufta, it slugs up Rav Shesh's assertion earlier that it could be done in the left hand, which he brought a quasi-raya from our Mishnah that says that the kaf is carried in to the Kodesh HaKodeshim in the left hand of the Kohen Gadol. So that's also a halacha, and from that Rav Sheshes wanted to say who adin the halacha of the dam of a carbon. But here we have a brisa that says the fair is not like that. Correct the Gemara, how could Rav Sheshes have overlooked this brisa from where we're proving, without a doubt, that the halacha done with the left hand is possible? Reb Sheshes himself cited this very same brisa to pose a challenge to Reb Chisda. So he knew about this brisa. So if he knew about this brisa, how is it that he didn't realize that this brisa is of Kloraraya, that Smoil is possible with the avoid of halacha? Frank the Gemara for Reb Sheshes, who the Oisfa. He himself cited this brisa to ask a kasha to Reb Chisda. I apologize. It's not a brisa, it's a Mishnah. Rashi says Reb Sheshes who the Oisfa lahamas nisim. He himself asked a kasha from this Mishnah. Who did he ask the kasha to? La Morid Reb Chisda. He asked not Reb Chisda himself, but the person who used to say over Reb Chisda's shir. And he said the following: Boy minei Reb Chisda. Whoever this Amori was, we don't know his name. He said, please go and ask Reb Chisda the following question. Halacha bizar mahi. May a Yisrael, a non-Kohen, do halacha? Carry the dam from the person who's makabel it and deliver it to the Kohen at the Mizbeach who's going to make the Zrika. Amar like Shera. So Reb Chisda responded that halacha bizar would be kosher. And Reb Chisda says, not only that, I'm not just saying it. I have a raya from a pasuk. Mikra Misayin. And what is the pasuk? We need Rashi to understand the raya from this pasuk. By Yishchadu Pesach, they shechted the Pesach. That we know for sure could be done with a zor. And then it says, "V'yizruku hakayanim miyodam." The Kohanim spritzed after they received the dam from the hands of the Zorim who passed it to them. That's how Rashi explains it. Because Vayizrukru HaKoyin, the Bach takes out the next word. Vayizrukru HaKoyinim miyodom shel shoichtim. They spritzed the blood after it was handed off to them by those who shechted it. Came Zorim who were not Kohanim. They were not Kohanim. And then I'm going to read in the Bach again. Shechozru v'kiblu hadam miyad HaKoyin HaMakabel. So the Zor shechted, the Kohen was Makabel. The Kohen that was Makabel passed off the dam to the Zor, who then brought it who then brought it to the Kohen. So from this pasuk, it seems to clearly indicate that the halacha was done by a Zor, and that was Reb Chista's right. The Levim Avshitin, and the Levim were skinning the animals. U'Moshe Reb Sheshes, and Reb Sheshes challenged Reb Chista. How could you say that a Zor makes halacha? This very Mishnah, Zor v'oinen shikr u'balmum v'kabbalah u'b'halacha u'b'zrika pasol v'chen Yosy v'chen Smoil pasol. So if Reb Sheshes clearly was aware of this Mishnah, why is it that he didn't see that Smoil is pasol as well? So the Gemara, he originally, when he said that the Smoil is kosher for halacha, he didn't know this Mishnah. But someone challenged him with this Mishnah and brought it to his attention. Basar deshama hadaisva. Once he knew about this Mishnah, now he figured he'll use it on Reb Chista. Someone used it on him. Someone used it to undo him. Now he's going to use it to undo Reb Chista. For the Gemara, you can't just willy-nilly use a Mishnah to slug up Reb Chista, because for Reb Chista, Kraka Amar. Reb Chista brought a pasuk that is stronger than the Mishnah. The pasuk is the makar of it all. It's like rock, paper, scissors. I mean, the rock, paper, scissors, everyone is weaker and stronger than something else. The Torah is stronger than everything. So how is Reb Chista going to understand the pasuk that seems to indicate that the Yisrael, the Zor did halacha, but the word Abed Ma'aseh Itztava, he didn't stam. The Yid didn't carry it. All the Yid was abstain. And Rashi explains, Ma'aseh Itztava, HaMakablim, the Kohanim who were Makabel the dam, they would place the blood in a container, of course, in the hand of the Zor. The Zorim don't move; they remain stationary. They don't carry it to the mizbeach. They just place the dam in their hands, kasher al gabi itztava, as if they were a bench, as if they were a table. And then the kohanim that were making the zrika took it from their hands. So, in fact, there was no halacha done at all through the Zor. Zok to the Gemara weiter. Boira papa, chafan chaveroi, but nosan noch chafna. We know that the normal process is that the Kohen Gadol scoops with his two hands out of the big machta that was brought from the base of Tinas, full of ketores. The Kohen Gadol takes two handfuls, scoops out of it together. But what if he didn't do it? What if somebody else did it for him? What if somebody else did it for him and then put it into his hands? Now it's got to be that their hands are the same size, otherwise there'd be other problems. So what is halacha? Maloi chafna v'inan va'ika is the only requirement that we need maloi chafna, and in fact we have that because he does have two handfuls. Oidilma, it says at the beginning of the pasuk, "V'lokach maloi amachta gachlei eish u'maloi chafna k'torei samim daka." So v'lokach means there has to be a deliberate ma'aseh lakicha. And here, if the Kohen Gadol didn't make that ma'aseh lakicha, rather someone else did it and put it into his hands, then maybe that wouldn't be good. And we don't have it taken. So the obvious question is, we already had this precise shaila before, because the shaila of Bein Habinayim, my favorite shaila is the ketores that got stuck in between the fingers of the Kohen Gadol, and that's what the Gemara said that the best type of fingers to have to take care of ketores are fat fingers. So it was Fat Lives Matter Day, so we were very excited. But on that day, the Gemara said that the shaila of Bein Habinayim, of the ketores in between the fingers of the Kohen Gadol that is scooped up, is totally in this same shaila. It says at the beginning of the pasuk, "V'lokach maloi hamachtam gach le'esh," and then later on it says, "Maloi chafna ketores samim daka behavi amibes laparoiches." The question was the v'lokach, which means there has to be a deliberate lekicha. It's directly preceding maloi hamachtam gach le'esh. It's only later in the pasuk that the Torah mentions the ketores. So the Gemara wants to know is the velokach. The first word of the pasuk, is it also directly addressing the melechafna of Keteris Hamdaka? If it is, and you need to have a deliberate lekicha, well, the deliberate lekicha, the Gemara said before, applies to what you scoop up in your hand. The residual Keteris that end up in between your fingers, they wouldn't qualify as a velokach, because that's not what you're scooping up. That's just residual stuff. So that was exactly what the Gemara explained the Shaila was. Does there have to be a lakicha on the Keteris or not? So why is the Gemara here repeating the identical Shaila? This was Tosfos' kasha. This was Shlomi Fantachas yesterday, but this is Tosfos' kasha. So Tosfos says as follows. It's very schwer. We had this exact same Shaila 2 days ago. By this Shaila bein habinayim. Yesh loimer, and for Tosfos, this Shaila is one level removed from the Shaila bein habinayim. If you hold that bein habinayim would not be acceptable to use for the Keteris that ends up in his fingers are not to be used. Why not? It's not considered that he took it because it only ended up as a byproduct between his fingers, but the main lekicha is only on what's in his hand. Why is that? No one made a lekicha on it, because when he took the Keteris, we don't consider it that he made it a lekicha on the Keteris that ended up between his fingers. But hachamai, here it's better, because here there was a lekicha. Even though the Kohen Gadol didn't do the velokach himself, someone made up a velokach, shapridami. Therefore, it will be good, because someone deliberately made that lekicha and then put it in to the Kohen Gadol's hands. The shaper karinim by velokach, haloikeach mishahu. There was a velokach, whoever that person was, and then the yosnum b'chafnav shal Kohen Gadol. He could put it now into the hands of the Kohen Gadol, and then the Kohen Gadol will bring that Keteris that this fellow friend made the chafina on the karibei melechafna v'hevi, and therefore he could bring it in. Or maybe the Kohen Gadol himself has to make the lekicha. So David Menzel asked, if you read the pasuk, obviously we're speaking about the Kohen Gadol. So the pasuk shot is about it, the Kohen Gadol has to do it. And in Chanami, he's right. But we're living almost when we die in the pasuk the Gemara feels that you need a raya that it has to be the Kohen Gadol himself. Maybe there could be another person. So that was the Gemara's kasha, and the Gemara says take it. So for the past day and a half, the last blot, this blot, every shaila the Gemara asks, it remains so far in the teku. The only shaila that was crystal clear so far in the last day was that the halacha must be done with the right hand, and it must be done with the Yisrael. What happened if Chafan Umeis, the Kohen Gadol did Malay Chafnav, and then he died? Now it's important that we know the order of operations. The first thing that the Kohen Gadol did was he shechted the par, and after he shechted the par, he gave the blood. We learned in the Mishnah, he gave the blood to someone who was stirring it, the Mamaris, and he stood on the right of the Ravi, and this fellow was dealing with the blood. While this fellow was dealing with the blood, the Kohen Gadol went to do the Keteris. So Chafan Umeis, which means he had already shechted the par. The blood of the par was sitting in the hands of the Kohen who was standing on the right of the Ravi. Then he made the chafin, he took the Keteris, he put it into the kaf, and then lo yaleinu, the Kohen was nifter. Umeis. So my sheyichnas acher bechafinasai. The stand-in Kohen Gadol, the skan Kohen Gadol, who's now going to take this place, does he have to make a new chafina, or can he use the same Keteris that the first Kohen Gadol scooped up? I'm going to assume that they were the same size. Amar Rab Chanina, ba urei she'elas harishonim. Rab Chanina said, this is gewaltig, because I'm so excited, he tells us Talmidim, that we're clearing this shaila in the Bis Medrash, and I found out that Rabbi Shuban Levi, who's from an earlier generation, and he's greater than us, he had the same shaila. So it's very exciting. Imagine you have a shaila on a sugya, and you find out that Chaim Kanievsky asked the shaila. You feel good about it. You're definitely on the right track. The Reb Chanina also was so proud to tell me, us guys, we might be young, But you know what? We hold our own because we asked the same shaila, we were machavan to the same shaila that the Frierdiker Kedar asked from Shub Levi. So now we're going to take a little detour. Remember, Reb Shub Levi Kashis, from this comment, it would indicate that Reb Shub Levi was older than Reb Chanina, and that's how Reb Chanina was all excited that he was machavan to the same shaila that Rabbi Shub Levi was, and that is, if the Chagadol Elenu died after made a chafina, could the person who stands in just continue on using that same chafina? Frank Gemara, I'm going to prove to you that Rabbi Chanina was older than Rabbi Shub Levi. The Amar Rabbi Shub Levi, Li hitter Rabbi Chanina. Rabbi Chanina was matter to me, and Rashi tells us from the fact that Rabbi Shub Levi refers to Rabbi Chanina as Rabbi Chanina, and that is Chanina plain. Clearly, he was in reverence of Rabbi Chanina. Clearly, Rabbi Chanina was senior to him. And what did Rabbi Chanina allow Rabbi Yeshua to do? Listoi shachalayim b'Shabbos, to drink some type of drink made out of cress on Shabbos. And I think the article says cress is some type of seed similar to mustard. And he allowed him to drink it. And of course, it means for refuah. It was a medicinal type of drink, but it was a standard drink as well. And he allowed him to drink that on Shabbos. In fact, tomorrow, what's the big chiddush of that? Pshita. That's a mishnah. Any type of food that's a real food, but it also has healing qualities, like chicken soup, a person's allowed to eat it l'refuah. And any drink, if it's a standard drink, you're allowed to drink it l'refuah. What's an example, the mashal of a drink that's mamish l'refuah? Yichveis diet Dr. Pepper. That's probably a mashka that could be l'refuah. So if you, since it's a regular drink, you're allowed to drink it on Shabbos. So do I need Reb Chanina to allow that to be drank? Of course it's allowed to be drank. Ella, the chiddush of Reb Chanina that was posed to Reb Chanina was Ella lishchoik v'lishtois shachalayim b'Shabbos. He allowed you to do a malacha d'oraisa and grind this cress so that you can make the drink and drink it on Shabbos. That's mamish chilul Shabbos. And that was the chiddush that Reb Chanina was matzah. In fact, tomorrow, let's analyze this chiddush. Hechadami. Idik esakanta. If we're talking about a chayla who's mesukah, it's a sakanis nefashis, well then, Mr. Sorry, I don't need Rabbi Chanina to tell me it's a big kiddush. Everybody knows that the pikuach nefesh is like Shabbos. Vidaleka sakanta, and if there's no sakanis nefashis, Meiser Asher, then Rabbi Chanina's stock would be dead wrong. Zokt Gemara, la'olam dika sakanta. Really, there's a sakanis nefashis here. So what was Rabbi Chanina's great kiddush? They weren't asking a halachic shaila from Reb Chanina. They were asking Reb Chanina a medical shaila. Mi masya, will this shachalayim work? If it will work, yeah, you're allowed to be mechal Shabbos for pikuach nefesh to do something that will be effective. If it's something that's not effective, surely you're not allowed to be mechal Shabbos to do it. So they had to confirm that this particular Michael would be effective. All Rabbi Shub Levi was asking Rabbi Chanina was mi masya. I'm not interested in your psak halacha on Shabbos. I just want to know if this is going to be a good refuah. Mi masya the nechol alayu shabbata or loy masya, or will it not help, and therefore will nechol alayu shabbata. So it's funny because we all thought that Rabbi Shub Levi was asking Rabbi Chanina halacha shaila. He was asking Torah Talmud Chacham. He said, "Nah, I'm a Talmud Chacham. I don't need your help with that. I just need to know if this is going to heal." So I remember when I was in Lakewood. So my Chavrusa was an older guy. He's a Rosh Yeshiva today. He's actually the Rosh Yeshiva of Shmuel Erman's son. He's David Fishman. He's a language guy. And he was my Chavrusa. And he would always be schmoozing and learning with Rosh Yeshiva. So I was there. So I also stuck my head in a little bit. So I remember I was a bacher, Rabbi Yisrael Newman came over to me and says, I want you to come to my office tonight at 1 o'clock in the morning. I'm saying shir tomorrow. I want to say over my shir to you. And in fact, in those days, he said shir every 2 weeks. And every 2 weeks, he would call me into his office so he could say his shir over to me. So could you imagine? I was barely able to get in his office door. My head was so swollen that he's saying his shir over to me that's it. I'm the biggest Talmud Chacham in the world. So as soon as he starts saying shir, I hack him with a kasha. He says, "Nee, ich weiß that the shir is good. Ich darf nur machen sicher as mein Yiddish is good." So he cut me down to size. He says, "I don't need your help on my shir. I just want to make sure that I'm using the right Yiddish word," because he wasn't that good in speaking Yiddish. So they told Reb Chanina, we don't need to know halacha. We just want to know, is this going to be a good, effective medicine? And if it would be, then we can allow someone to be Mechal Shabbos to make it par chayla sheish b'sakana. U'ma'ishna Reb Chanina, Why did they ask Reb Chanina this medical question? Because Reb Chanina happened to have known medicine. He knew medicine well. And we're going to show that from another anecdote where Reb Chanina surely knew about his medicine. Nobody ever came to consult with me about someone who was wounded from the attack of a white donkey, and he survived. So you see, he was a medical expert. He knew which type of injuries were fatal. In fact, the Gemara, that's factually wrong. We see that many people get injured by a white donkey, and in fact they survive. So the Gemara, that's not what Reb Chanina said. What he said was Ema B'Koyes. Of course, people survive, but he's claiming that their injuries were never completely healed. We see that people get injured by wild white donkeys and they get fully healed, even from their wound. So tomorrow, the type of donkey that Reb Chanina was referring to, where people don't ever fully heal, are besumkin inu, if the donkey is red, the chiyura and reish karayu, its knees are white. Those were, I guess, rarer type of donkeys that were super wild. And there, Reb Chanina said, I never saw someone who got injured from such a type of donkey, and he got healed. So now let's get back to our subject. Yes?
Is the word v'chaya extra? Nobody consulted me about an injury from a white donkey, and he lived. That word "and he lived," is that not extra? Obviously, nobody's going to consult him when he died.
No, but the question is he might still be alive. So someone says, this guy got injured, what can we do for him? And he's saying, I wasn't able to save him. So it doesn't necessarily mean that he was already dead instantly from the injury. It means he never fully recovered and he died ultimately from his injury.
Good. Okay.
So Frank the Gemara, Mikol Makim, Shema Mina, after all this whole story, we do extract the piece of information that we're looking for. Reb Chanina cautious. Clearly Reb Chanina was older. Even though you don't see that Reb Shimon Levi consulted him for halachic matter, it was a medical matter, but you see that Reb Chanina was older because he was addressed by the word Rebbe. And since when Reb Shimon Levi called him Rebbe, that clearly shows that Reb Shimon Levi held that Reb Chanina was older than him, greater. Rashi says, it wasn't the normal way for elderly Rabbanim to refer to Bachim as Rebbe. Ella, what he would have said was Hitter Chanina. Ella li Hitter Chanina hayomer. He would have said that Chanina without the Rebbe. So from the fact that Rabbi Shimon Levi addressed Chanina with Rebbe Chanina shows that he was older. So how could Rabbi Chanina have said, we're so wonderful that we were zoichet to be machaven Rabbi Shimon Levi? Fakert, Rabbi Shimon Levi was after him. This is what he said. What he meant to say is fakert. Good for Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi that he was machaven to us. Let's see Rashi. Good for Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi that he was machaven to my shaila. So that's like the Reshiva clearing a shaila and shir. He says in Grade, the Yankel asked me the shaila as well. He was machaven to the shaila. So now we have to get back to the subject matter. The subject matter was, we had a question, if the Kohen Gadol Lo Yaleinu died after he made the chafina, and now you have this ketara sitting in the spoon, can the new Kohen come in and just walk into his place and take over? Frank the Gemara, could Reb Chanina even have contemplated such a shaila? It's impossible that he would even contemplated such a shaila. Because Reb Chanina said, V'par v'loy b'damei shapar. It says, B'zois yavei aron el hakodesh, v'par ben bakal achatos. So we learned that he has to come with a par, meaning that he can't just take the dam of a par that he didn't shech, like the dam of the Kohen Gadol, who he took over for. And therefore, if the Kohen Gadol died after he shechted the par, while the blood is still around, this new Kohen Gadol will have to shecht a new par. So Amar Reb Chanina, and Reb Chanina tells us on Amud Beis, we're going to see that machlokes, that Keteris Shechafna Koidim Shchitas Apar. There's another rule. We know what's the order of operation. First, the Kohen Gadol shechs the par, Then the blood is captured and it's given to a kohen to shake on the rev, and only then does the kohen gadol start the process of the ketores and makes the chafina, which means the chafina has to be done after he shechs the par. Well, what if he did it out of order? What about if it was ketores shechapna kodim shchitas a par? He did it before. It's not a good chafina. But let's think a second. How could you declare that this new kohen gadol who took over after the first kohen gadol died, after the chafina, how could you even contemplate that the new kohen gadol could just take this chafina and go in? Don't forget, if he died at this point, that means there's the dam still sitting around from the carbon that the first kohen gadol shechted as well, and that dam is going to be possible because now this kohen gadol has to shech a new par. So if he's going to take the chafina in, that means the chafina would have occurred before he shechted the new par, and that for sure wouldn't be good. So he couldn't contemplate this shaila at all, because according to Chachamim, what has to happen is if the kohen gadol died after the chafina, first he has to now shech a new par, and then he'll have to make a new chafina, so that the chafina should be after the shechita of the par. So then how could you even contemplate that this kohen gadol, the new kohen gadol, will be able to use the chafina of the next kohen gadol? Zok the Gemara, Hachika Amar. This is what Rab Chanina meant to say. Mi de kamaboy leha, since Rabbi Shub and Levi even contemplated this shaila, mechalal de kasavar, it must be that Rabbi Shub and Levi holds, unlike what I hold, but he holds the par v'afilu b'damish par. He argues on me, and he must learn that the kohen gadol that took over doesn't have to shech a new par. He can just pick up the dam from the par that the previous kohen gadol shechted and go on, and therefore maybe he can use the chafina of the kohen as well. Zok the Gemara, and ulamai the svir lay, and Rabbi Chanina is saying based on Rabbi Yeshua and Levi's shita that he can just take the dam of the par that the kohen gadol before him shechted. Then his shaila makes sense. She lost it. His shaila is consistent with the shaila of earlier generations. Zok the Gemara, my havela. So we do have a shaila. We do have a shaila. Can the new kohen gadol use the ketores that was prepared by the previous kohen gadol, or must he start over again? Zok the Gemara, Amar Papa. Here's the answer. We're going to soon learn a machlokes if you need to have one chafin or two chafin, and it's important that we tickle our memories and we go back to a shaila we had on the very first amud of the parak. And there was a shaila in the first amud of the parak of whether or not we could make a custom kaf that was exactly the size of the hands of the kohen gadol, and instead of the kohen gadol doing the chafina with his hands, maybe he can just use the spoon to make the chafina. We know that by the carbon mincha, the kmitza must be done with his hand. The question is, does the chafina have to be done with his hand, or could it be done with a keli? The Gemara proposed a riot, because in the Bryce it sticks in some extra words. After it says that he made the chafina and he put in the kaf, it sticks in the next word, the kach hoisamidas. And these three words are extra. The Gemara wanted to argue, maybe the kach hoisamidas is telling you that you don't have to make a chafina with your hands. You can use a spoon to make the chafina. That's what the Gemara proposed. So the Gemara said you don't have a raya, because maybe the kach hoisamidas tells me a different halacha, that even though he made a chafina outside of the base kodesh HaKodeshim, and then he poured all the kataris into the spoon, when he takes that spoon with kataris back into the kodesh HaKodeshim, he can't just dump the spoon on the machta, on the chalam. Rather, he has to transfer the kataris that's in the spoon back into his hands, and then with his hands, he places the kataris on the fire. And that's the second chafina. The second chafina is in the base kodesh HaKodeshim. You have to transfer. So the Gemara said, since the kach midasa could mean several different things, we can't prove anything from it, because we can always say that the Mishnah meant something else. So that is the shaila. If it's chayfin, the chayja v'chayfin, must you do another chafina once you're in the kodesh hakodesh? So zok the Gemara, that shaila will impact our shaila as to whether or not the new kohen gadol can use the same kataris that the first kohen gadol made the chafina. And this is what the Gemara says. Amar Papa, if you learn that once he's in the Kodesh HaKodeshim, he makes another chafina, then it's logical to argue that Chavere Nichnas B'chafinas. Then his Chaver can go in with his Chafina. Why? Because he'll be Mekayim Chafina when he goes inside, he's going to do the second Chafina. But he ain't Chayvin Chayzev Chayvin. But if you don't repeat the Chafina, then Tibaylach, then we're going to have a Shaila. Is the Chafina of the first Kohen Gadol a good Chafina? But this is very, very problematic. Because if you hold Chayvin Chayzev Chayvin, doesn't that mean that two Chafinas are mandatory? So even though this new Kohen Gadol is going to do the Chafina once he gets into the Beis Kodesh HaKodeshim, but he's still missing the Chafina that was supposed to be done before he got into Kodesh HaKodeshim. So how does this help us? So Tosfos asks that question. Hey, my friend Tosfos, if it is a chiyuv to make Chafina stay pamayim twice, echad mi b'chutz, echad mi b'chnim, so heichi ayel chavrei b'chafinasei. How in the world could Kohen Gadol number 2 be yoytze with the chafina of his friend that was done earlier? Mikol makam harei loy chafan kohen echad trei zimni. One Kohen Gadol did not do the 2 chafinas that are required. V'nira dehachi brusha. The Gemara is not learning that if you hold chayvin, it's mandatory. That just means it's optional. V'nira dehachi brusha. Chayvin v'chayfan. L'fisha min ha'Torah ein l'davar kitzvah. There's no limit to the amount of chafinas that one is allowed to make. You have a right to scoop this keparis out as many times as you want to. The only concern is your chafina has to be a full, complete chafina. So since you could make as many chafinas as you want, why did the Rabbanan say that you should make another chafina inside? Because imagine you made the first chafina, and as you're walking with a spoon, some pieces of keteris fall off your spoon. So now you're going to have a pasul of chafina because something is missing. So by making another chafina in the base kodesh HaKodeshim, right before you put the keteris on the fire, you'll have a chafina that's kosher because everything that would be in your chafina would go onto the gechalim. So once we know you can do multiple chafinas, then kain im chafatz. If the Kohen Gadol made a chafina, the nasan l'soich hakaf, and then he put what he was chayfin into the spoon, umeis b'chutz, and the Kohen Gadol, the first Kohen Gadol who passed away, chayzer chaveroi l'chayfin pam shenis. The next Kohen, the replacement Kohen, could make another chafina, the chayzer v'nasan l'soich l'kaf, and he could put it back into the kaf outside, and the nichnas will go in, and then he could do another chafina inside if he wants it. The Karina be Malay Chafna Ve'evi. It'll still be considered Malay Chafna Ve'evi. The Leka El Habo Achas. At the end of the day, there's only one Habo. So that's the svara of what Rav Papa was saying. If it's Chayvin, meaning you're allowed to make as many Chafinas as you want, so then let this Kohen Gadol make another Chafina, so then he made the Chafina, and therefore everything is good. However, if you're not allowed to do multiple Chafinas, and where would you get that from? Because the mashma melechafna chad amar achmon the meloy trace in because meloy trace in the melechafna. The Torah seems to indicate you do it once and not multiple times. Now this Kohen cannot go make another chafina. So now the only way he'll be yoyt is if the chafina of his predecessor would be good for him. Okay, and that's where the shaila is. That's how Rav Papa wanted to assess the shaila. Amalei Rav Huna b'Rei Rav Yishula Rav Papa Adrabah. I think the logic is exactly the opposite. If you're chayfin twice, then then for sure no one should take over for the original chayvin. Because it's impossible that something won't go missing. And of course, Rav Huna's approach is that chayfin means these 2 chafinas are mandatory and not it's optional like Rav Papa wanted to learn. And therefore, it's impossible that something won't go missing from the original chafina, and therefore it's going to be possible. The ein chayvin, if you don't have to make another chafina, then then you'll have a good child. Which now segues us into this base question: do you make 1 chafina or 2 chafinas? So let's just see what Rashi says. Adirabba, if you hold chayvin, then surely the second Kohen Gadol can't use the chafina of the original Kohen Gadol. She efsher shelo yachzer chaveroi v'shelo yoser. Let's see what the Vav says. V'shelo yoser sheyu chafnav shel rishon shavin chafnav shel sheni. It's impossible that the two kohanim have hands that are exactly the same size, and therefore it's impossible that these two chafinas will be parallel, and therefore it should be a problem. But if you only have one chafina, then the original chafina was good, and then you might be able to use it for the second chayv. The question is, when the kohen gadol gets with the kaf into the base kodesh HaKodeshim, does he have to now transfer what's in the kaf back into his hands, or can he just pour it from the kaf straight into the machta on top of the coals? Tashma, kach hoysa midas. Our Mishnah says kach hoysa midas. It's an extra word. What does it mean? Similar to the answer that the Gemara gave to the previous shaila of whether or not you need a spoon, whether or not you could just do it with a spoon in the first place. My love, let's say that the Tana is trying to tell us keshem shemidasa mibachutz, kach midasa mibafnim. The same thing you do on the outside, you do on the inside. You mentioned you need a chafina, both on the inside and on the outside. So you have a right at chayfin v'chayfin v'chayfin. Maybe what the Tana is telling you that you don't need a chavina at all with the hands of the kohen gadol. You could do it originally with a spoon, a custom spoon that was made the same volume as the two handfuls of the kohen gadol. Or inami shelo yachshav v'shelo yoser. Or maybe the Tana is trying to tell us a different thing, that you have to have the full chafina. If anything goes missing or if anything extra gets added to it later, it will pass. So this is the shayla. Tashma, we're going to have a very, very, very clear proof. The fact that you do have to make the second chafina, you do have to transfer the ketoris back in to the hands of the kohen once he gets into the base kodesh HaKodesh. And how do you see that? Because Ketzid was exactly how is this chafina done? Because you have to understand, he has a spoon with, let's say, a 2-foot handle. He's holding it at the end of the handle, and he somehow has to transfer his ketoris into his hand. So imagine the kohen gadol is walking into the kodesh HaKodeshim. In his right hand, he's holding the machta that's full of gecholim. In the left hand, he's holding the handle of the spoon. And he walks in. So what does he do? The first thing he does is with his right hand, he places the machta on the floor and lets go. Now he has two hands free. And now he holds the end of the spoon with two hands. Eichid is a bazek barasha, it's spicer. He holds the spoon with his two hands. The yesha and b'shina, there are those who hold that he does it with his mouth, which wouldn't be consistent with the Gemara we had earlier, that it's inappropriate to serve an adain, to serve the Rebbeinu Shalom with something in your mouth. So let's say he's holding it in his hand. So he has the shaft of the spoon in his hand. So let's say this yad is the shaft of the spoon, and using his thumb, he pulls it back. As you can see, I'm pulling it back, and I'm retracting it. So he climbs up the spoon with his thumb, until the long handle of the spoon is already in between his elbows, or there are those who learn in his underarm, and his hands are already right at the spoon portion, at the business end of the spoon. And then, by steadying it in between his elbows or in his underarm, he turns the spoon on its axis like this. He turns the spoon on its axis to unload 180 degrees, to unload the ketoris that's in the spoon into his hand. And then, the tzover, when he places it on the fire, he doesn't spread it around that it should all go up in smokes right away. Rather, he piles it up. When you pile something up on the fire, it doesn't all go up in smokes. It takes time for this pile to get full of smoke. Why didn't he want it to get smoky right away? You don't want the smoke to come right away because it'll blind him. And he wants to get out of the way, get out of the Kodesh HaKodeshim before the smoke hits. Similar to when they dropped the atomic bomb, the airplane that dropped it had to turn around and get away as quickly as possible so it wouldn't be impacted by the explosion. The Yeshaim, but there are those who say exactly the opposite. Mefazra, you spray a thin layer of thirst all over the surface of the coal. To the contrary, we want the smoke to be abundant. Why? Because we don't want him chas v'sholem to take in the beautiful sights of the Kodesh HaKodeshim, because that's an issur for him to have enough from that. So by creating smoke right away, he won't be able to see it because it'll cloud his vision. He won't be able to see what's going on. And then the Brisa comments, "V'zuhi avoda kasha shevamit." This was one of the very difficult avodas to the base. This is the most difficult avoda in the mitzvah. In fact, Zuhi v'suloi. This was the hardest one. There was nothing else that was as hard as this. V'ika malika, which is hard. V'ika kamitza, which is hard. Ella, what the Gemara means, what the Brisa means is Zuhi avoda kasha may avodas kasha shevamit. This is one of the most difficult avodas, not necessarily the most. Whatever the case is, from the process that the Mishnah describes and the Brisa describes in great detail, Shmamina chayfen, the chayzer v'chayfen, Shmamina. Now, just to get to the difficulty of these avodas, Tosfos is masber the reason why it was difficult to do the Kemitza, because we're talking about, like we said earlier in the Gemara, not a regular silas mincha, but a mincha machbas or marcheshes, which was baked or fried. So it becomes, it's like a piece of bread. So even though they chop it up into pieces, it's still chunks. So if you grab something with your finger like this and you have a chunk sticking out below and above, you have to actually break that chunk off without pulling the whole piece out. And that's a lot of hard work. It's difficult to do. The Malika Tosfos is hard, not because it's so difficult to do, but it's very painful when you're putting such pressure on your fingernail, pushing your fingernail through the backbone of the bird, that will cause you pain. It hurts your nail. It's like smashing something in your nail. And that's why it was difficult. And the difficulty of the Ketayos, Tosfos says, he says Malika, he says Mafetaner, and the Chafina, he says, if you hold it in your teeth, it's hard. But the other thing he says is, the problem is, where is he doing all this? Right on top of the machta, which is boiling hot. Imagine you're standing on top of your barbecue grill and you're like within 6 inches of your barbecue grill, it's piping hot. It's very hard and painful to work in such a situation. It's similar to fixing someone's air conditioner in an attic when it's like 160 degrees up there. It's an avodah kosher. So Daniel Finkel came over to us yesterday and told us that he was speaking to somebody, I don't remember who, and somebody said there's a fourth avodah kosher of a mikdash, because somebody once asked Rebellia, you and Shmuel Kamenetsky ran your yeshiva together for many years, and you're both very different personalities. How did you manage to get along? So Rebellia said, Zu avodah kosher of a mikdash. That's what Rebellia said. So when Daniel Finkel told me the story, I laughed to myself, because my memory is that the reason why they got along so well is because Reb Shmuel never challenged Rebellia, and he always accepted whatever Rebellia said, even if he didn't agree with it. But Rebellia said it was avoid the kosher of the mikdash. Zok Gemara, Ibailahu, Shachar umeis. What happens if the Kohen Gadol shechted? So this goes back to the shayla that we had earlier with Reb Chanina and Reb Shub Levi, where the Kohen Gadol, the first Kohen Gadol, shechted his animal, and then they were kabel the dam is sitting on the right of the Revi, and then the Kohen Gadol loyally dies. Mao shichanes acher bedama. Could the new Kohen Gadol now just pick up where the old Kohen Gadol left off and take the dam in, or does he have to shech his own carbon? Miamrin bepar, ba'afilu bedama shopar. It says b'zoy shavi ayin al kodesh bepar b'makal lachatos. So is it enough that he's not going in with the par? He didn't shech the par, but he's just taking the blood in. That's qualified. Oidilma bepar v'loy bedama shopar. And therefore, the new Kohen Gadol will have to shech his own new par. Like we said a moment ago on Omer Aleph, Reb Chanina Omer bepar v'loy b'dam shopar. Reb Chanina said he would have to shech the new par. For Shlokish Omer bepar v'afilu b'dam shopar, the new Kohen Gadol does not have to shech a new par. Rather, he can just take the blood that the other Kohen Gadol left over there on the Revi, and he can spritz that inside. Rabbi Omar bepar v'loy b'dam shopar. So Rabbi agrees with Reb Chanina. Which is like Rish Lakish. Reb Ami wants to prove his point. It says by the Carbon Pesach, up until when can you join a group or remove yourself from a group? Until they actually check the Carbon Pesach. Once they check the Carbon Pesach, if you were part of a group, you can't pull out anymore, and you can no longer join a group once the Carbon was checked. The problem is, where do you know you have to be part of a group? Because it says, you have to connect to a seh. But we just said that a par is still considered a par even after it's shechted, even at the time of the zrika. because by taking the blood in qualifies as bezois yove iron alakoidish, the par and bucker. So clearly, dam is called a par. So ibazai dam should be called a seir as well, a seh as well. So why can't you let someone still register to a carbon or remove his registration from a carbon Pesach even after the animal was shechted, since until there's rika at least. The misa achi yizrek boiler up until there's rika, it's still called a seh. The more shiny hasam the chsiv mihiyos miseh, and we darshan michiyusa the seh. It's not nearly enough that there should be a seh here in existence, because of course if there is a seh in existence, it's called a seh. But here the pasuk says it has to be a live seh. If it's not a live seh, you can no longer modify your registration. Mazav Mazutra. Ain't poidin, you're not allowed to be poida a peter chamor, loy be'egel, v'loy be'chaya, v'loy be'shchuta. So it says v'loy be'shchuta. It says in the Torah you have to use a seh to be poida the peter chamor. Why is a shchuta not called a seh? As we are saying over here, as Reish Lakish says over here, and as Rabbi Nafka says over here, that even though it's shechted, it's still considered a par, so it should still be considered a seh. Why can't you not use it to be poida peter chamor? By Pesach, we already said it has to be alive. It says and since it's Xer Shava, we learned that by Pesach Chamor it also has to be alive. If you're going to learn that the seh that you use to be poida the chamor has to be similar to the seh of the carbon Pesach, well, there's many other halachas that you would apply if they're going to be similar, such as Imal Halon, Zachar, it has to be male, Tam, and cannot have a mum, Uven Shon, that has to be within a year. Afghan maybe will restrict Pidyon Petachamor to a seh that's a male, Zachar. Tam may not have a mum, Uven Shon, that has to be within a year. And we know that's not true. Tamaloimer Tifta, it says twice in the pasuk by Petachamor, the word Tifta, to include more things are eligible to be pointed. So therefore, Reba, it includes the Tam, it includes even the Balmum, even if it's older, even if it's female. Tifta, Reba, Afilu Kulanami. So then why not include as well if it's dead? The more in Cain Seh my Hanilai. We have Xer Shav Seh, so it makes sense that Seh will tell you it has to be alive. But to tell you all the specifics and the details, for that Tifta says ignore the details. And we'll stop here, and we're in the middle of the Shaila as to whether or not the Kohen Gadol who took over from a Kohen Gadol who passed away after the Shechita of his par, can this Kohen Gadol just take the remaining blood and make this Rika, or must this new Kohen Gadol shech the new par and start all over again? And with that, we will stop. Have a wonderful, wonderful day.
Yes.